We're going to be talking Electric Vehicle 101 today. So if that's what you're here for, you're in the right place. Thanks for joining, everybody. Please do use the Q&A feature for questions. You can drop your questions in as we go, and we'll get to them at the end of the discussion today. So please do use that Q&A feature. For the chat, just drop in your name, your congregation, if you're connected to one, your location. Helps us all to get to know each other a little bit better. And we will go ahead and get started. My name is Bill Bradley. I'm with Interfaith Power and Light. Thank you so much for joining. We're going to be talking about Electric Vehicles 101. If you're as confused as I have been looking at electric vehicles these days, then you're in the right place. We're going to learn a little bit more about it. So I'd like to introduce our guest speaker today. Rosa Mitsumasu Scotti is a program manager at the nonprofit Plug-in America. She's joining us today. She'll be talking about electric vehicles and giving us some good overview. She works on initiatives with utilities, with private companies, and with community organizations. She received her Master of Science in Sustainable Systems from Rochester Institute of Technology, and her graduate work focused on climate change adaptation, and as you might expect, clean vehicle technologies. She lives in San Diego, California, and she's originally from Lima, Peru, where she was born and raised. So, Rosa, I will let you take it away. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we're looking so forward to the talk today.
Thank you, Elle. Thank you so much for having me. I am just so excited to be able to share about electric vehicles. And I'm going to be sharing my screen. I hope that you all can see it. So today, welcome everybody. Thank you for coming in today to learn more about EVs. So I'm going to be giving a quick overview about EV technology and sharing helpful tools and practical resources for folks to learn more about EVs and get through all of the information that is out there right now. So just real quick, this is the layout of our conversation today. And just doing some introductions and then going down on EV basics, EV charging incentives for consumers, and some tools that are helpful. And before I dive in, I want to touch very briefly on IPL School Congregations Challenge. This is such an interesting challenge that is the annual contest to recognize school congregations that are becoming energy efficient and playing a sustainable role in their communities. IPLs is inspiring and mobilizing people of faith and conscience to take bold and just action on climate through this contest. The deadline has closed for this challenge, but there has been a lot of really interesting submissions with 6 categories, including the Cool Congregations Planner, Energy Saver, Renewable Role Model, Sacred Ground Steward, Community Inspiration, and EV Leader. And I have been invited to be one of the judges for the EV category. So we'll be sharing the results very soon. So yeah, like Bill said, I work at Plug-in America. We are a nonprofit organization, and we're basically the voice of the EV driver across the country. And we've been working on furthering the adoption of electric vehicles for many years now. The organization formally became a 501c3 in 2008. And we do a lot of policy advocacy. We do a lot of events so people can test drive EVs. And also we have interesting programs where we partner with local communities as well as with dealerships. And Plugstar is one of those programs. It's been designed to collaborate with dealerships so that the shopping experience for an EV is exceptional. So what happened was that a few years ago, if a person would walk into a dealership to buy an electric vehicle, their shopping experience was really poor because sales staff couldn't answer questions like charging, where do I charge, how much, what's the range, what are the challenges, will I be able to charge at work, will I be able to find charging in public, what types of charging do they exist. So we have creating a training and ecosystem of tools for dealers and their staff so that they can provide a really good shopping experience for consumers. And on the consumer side, we have plugstar.com, which is a website where people can learn about all of the important information, find chargers, electricians, and events so that they can test drive EVs. So I'll be talking about that a little bit later. And here on the screen, just sharing some objectives for today's webinar, which are mainly three, talking about EVs, brief technology overview for you guys, share crucial information about EVs like charging and incentives. Those are the main questions that we get from people: where to charge, how to charge, and what incentives do I have to purchase an EV, to install chargers at home, and etc. And also sharing important tools that will help you, browse through all of that information that we have basically sorted for you guys. All right, so let's dive into EV basics. So when we talk about electric vehicles, EVs is any vehicle with a plug. And this is really important because as I'm going to be talking in the presentation, I'm going to be saying the acronym EV. And EV really means two types of vehicles that have a plug. Both of them have a plug. So one, the BEV, battery electric vehicle, which is all electric, and the other one is the plug-in hybrid electric vehicle that is electric and uses also gas. In the market, there are some vehicles that are hybrids that don't plug to the wall. We are not going to be talking about those vehicles. We're only going to be talking about those that actually connect and charge with a plug. So just real quick, battery electric vehicles or BEVs are all electric. Nowadays, there's a lot more incentives for them. Their cost of ownership is significantly less than an analog gas vehicle because they don't have an engine. So they don't have all of those moving parts that the engine has that usually you have to replace. There's no oil changes required. There are no belts that you have to change. It really is just an electric motor in a battery. So you may have to do a little bit of like tire alignment, the windshield wiper fluids, like some of that stuff, but there's no other type of maintenance. So that really lowers the cost in comparison to an analog gas vehicle. And it's great for drivers that can charge at home or at work. That's very easy because, you go to sleep, charge your car, you wake up with a fully charged fueled vehicle. Or if you're at home, or I'm sorry, if you go to an office, go to the office and you have availability to charge, that's great. At the end of your day, at the end of your shift, your car may be full, your battery may be full. So that's really helpful. Then the other type is the plug-in hybrid. These are the vehicles that have a battery, but also have an engine. So these vehicles used to be a lot more popular than BEVs, but as the market is offering more EVs, there's a lot more all-electric vehicles. So there are some incentives for these vehicles, but not as much. And still they have generally lower maintenance costs. And it's suitable for all types of commutes, right? People that want to have long range that take across state, they may feel more comfortable because they know exactly what to do when it comes to fueling their vehicle. So it really depends. So those are the two vehicle types that we're going to be talking about today. All right, so let's jump into the batteries. The batteries, of course, is the main source of fuel for an electric vehicle. And an important thing to consider when you're buying a new EV is that it comes with, most of them come with an 8-year or 100,000-mile warranty, as well as their battery packs. They must be covered for at least 8 years or 100 miles in warranty. Earlier, when vehicles were being introduced, fire risk of batteries was something that was discussed a lot, but today, fire risk on EVs and their batteries is significantly low. So for every 100,000 sales, there's on average only 25 EVs that catch on fire compared to over 1,500 gas-powered vehicles that catch on fire. So the chance of injury in a crash is lower in an EV when it comes to fire risk. The key features that we talk about when we talk about EVs are these four that you see in the screen. First of all, it's powerful. You have instant torque on demand, and it's a quiet ride. Obviously, you don't have an engine, or maybe you have a smaller engine if it's a plug-in hybrid. So it's a lot quieter. Of course, it's cleaner. It uses virtually, if it's an EV and it doesn't have an engine, it will be just, you just plug it. So there are zero emissions in that case. And if you live in a dwelling that has solar power, you're virtually driving on sunshine. So it's significantly cleaner, no emissions. And EV charging now is ubiquitous in most places. Well, I think it really varies across the United States, but there are corridors across the West Coast, for instance, where you can find charging. Where I am in California, there's a lot of charging options. I know that in the East Coast, and really they just keep coming up because there's a lot more incentives for vehicles to charge. So EV charging is everywhere. And they're now in places like Costco or, regular Walmart is often in EV charging. So a lot of places where people will go and to do their shopping, they can just charge their car. So they continue to show up all over the place. And of course, they are significantly cheaper to fuel because gasoline has so much more variability when it comes to the price. If you're charging, especially if you're charging at home, you're paying significantly less to fuel your vehicle. That's one. Second, we talked about the maintenance. There's significantly less maintenance costs. And third, now purchasing new EVs as well as pre-owned EVs, there are significant incentives. The federal tax credit is an important incentive right now. And we're going to be talking about that later on in the presentation. All right, so let's talk about EV charging. So where do EV drivers charge the most? This is a really important question that we get. And the most common place really is at home. Most people that have EVs charge at home. They're able to plug it at night, overnight, and then wake up with a full battery. The second most common place is at a workplace. And the third one is public charging. That's just the nature of EV charging right now. So let's talk a little bit about charging levels and their speeds. There is, generally speaking, 3 levels. Level 1, which is the slowest one, and we've used some photos at the bottom to be able to sort of show you the difference across the 3 levels. Level 1, which is, significantly slower, it's just 3 to 5 miles per hour, and you just connect the connector that comes with your vehicle. Most EVs are coming with this plug that it's a little bit slow, but you can use it anywhere. Basically, it's portable. You can plug it in your 120 volt outlet, and you can also take it with you. And you can also charge, but it's fairly slow, right? Level 2 is significantly faster. It's 10 to 40 miles per hour. So if you're charging overnight, you can get significant mileage. And usually you have to go through some changes in your electrical system at work to install this level 2 at home. But you can also find this faster level charging publicly, either at work or in public charging. And of course, the third one is fast charging, which is only, you cannot install this guy at home because it's high powered, it's DC fast charging, and it's 3 to 20 miles per minute. So it's significantly faster than the other two levels. But this, you actually have to go somewhere away from home. And right now, there are different connectors for different vehicle models. So it's not like, unfortunately, it's not as standardized as it is. All vehicles can go to all gas stations and basically just connect the gas station and fuel with gasoline. That's not the case for EVs yet. There are 3 different types of connectors. And as you can see on the screen, the first one, which is SAE combo, is the one that is the most common one. Most European and US brands have this connector. And then there's the second one, which is CHAdeMO. But Nissan recently announced that they are actually switching to the first one. And then the third one, which is Tesla. Tesla has chargers and connectors that are specifically just for Teslas, and others cannot use unless you have an adapter. So we've talked about where do people charge the most. So people mostly charge at home. And like I said, you may just use the level 1 connector that comes with your vehicle, and it really depends on your commute. On average, people don't drive more than 33 miles per day. That's nationwide in the United States. So it may work if you have, like, if you're just running around town, doing errands, commuting to work, doing less than 40 miles per day. But if you're driving more than that, you may want to upgrade to a level 2 charger. And right now, there is a lot of charger models out there in the market. And you will want to look at a unit that works for you. You may do now. There's so much variability. There's options for people. You can connect an app. You can have Wi-Fi in your charger. You can, through your app, you can select the times that the app activates. So it only is from noon to 6 a.m. It can be wall mounted. It can be portable. So there's many ones. So there's a lot of shopping options, but it really depends on the type of commuting that you have for you to determine if you want to upgrade to your level 2. And it really depends on how much it costs. And I know that the folks coming into this call are coming from all over the country. So it really depends on the cost associated with any vendors at home. So it can start around $300, but it can rapidly go up depending on what you need. So for instance, if you want to, first of all, for the purchase of it, you may be able to find an incentive. Your state or your local utility may offer an incentive for you to purchase a level 2 charger. So Plugstar.com has a way to show you if you have an incentive based on your zip code. So you can, and we can talk about that later too. And also, you will likely need to work with a qualified electrician, because any electrical upgrade that you do at home, allocating this to a dedicated circuit, will definitely require the use of an electrician, because it's really dangerous to do electrical work on your own. You may require a permit. That's how the price may go up depending on where you live. So Plugstar also offers a tool to find an electrician that is qualified, if you don't already know one. And an important component, if you're charging at home, is that a lot of utilities are using time of use rate plans for EVs. So you may be able to sign up especially for an EV rate if you charge your vehicle from midnight to 6 a.m. For instance. There's a common time frame where charging rates are significantly lower because there's less demand on the grid. Generally speaking, most people are asleep during that time. So utilities are providing this time of use rate plan. So if people are really thinking about buying an EV and charging at home, usually if you're buying an EV and you should be able to charge at home, it's good to contact your electricity provider to ask if there's a time of use rate and that you can sign up for. All right, so let's talk a little bit about charging on the go. A lot of EVs right now have built-in navigation that tells them where to go to charge, but it can be very basic. So there's a lot of tools out there where you can find where to charge. And some of these tools not only show you the location, but the type of the charging service, and also depending on your vehicle, if it actually fits. Like I shared earlier, not all of the connectors, not all of the chargers work for all of the vehicles. So ChargeWay, for instance, is really good at that one. You can enter the type of car that you have, and it'll show you only the stations that are for that specific vehicle. But that's only for mobile, whereas Charge Hub and PlugShare, you can use it on your computer and on your phone. And these apps are free, and you can find a lot of really good information in terms of the cost. Do you need some of them? You need a membership, exactly where it's located, and other additional information. And like I said, some of these, there's a lot of variability across charging, especially on public charging. So some of the things that are important to keep in mind when you're thinking, okay, how much is it going to cost me to charge? It really varies. Unfortunately, we're at the stage right now where the market hasn't really standardized charging across EVs. So these apps will help you with this information, but just know that some of those will require a registration, and that registration is oftentimes free. You may have a monthly fee. The charging cost is not always the same across the charging networks. And you can be charged by the minute or by the kilowatt hour. Sometimes each network, like Electrify America, for instance, they may have their own apps that are free. Sometimes you will need to use an app to access, and most of them have a toll-free support line that you can call if you need to ask any questions, if there's a challenge with your charger. So they usually have a number to call. And when you're thinking about fast charging, remember DC fast charger was that third level. These are the ones that you want to look for, which are Electrify America on the left and Tesla on the right. And Tesla, I mean, is only for Tesla vehicles, whereas Electrify America is for a lot of other brands. They have both the CCS combo and the CHAdeMO connector. All right, so that was a lot about the technology and about charging at home, charging at public charging. So let's talk a little bit about consumer incentives now. So as many of you know, there is a federal EV tax credit for new EVs, and as part of the Inflation Reduction Act, there was an update to the federal EV tax credit in 2022, in August of 2022. So this tax credit is of up to $7,500 for the purchase of new EVs. And keep in mind that this is a tax credit. It's not a tax rebate. So it's not like you're going to receive a check in the mail for $7,500. It's that if your liability of tax will decrease by up to $7,500, depending on the type of vehicle that you have. So right now, so back in 2022, we had some rules, and then they changed in August And now, as we started to 2023, there are some new rules, and there's going to be even new rules in 2024. So I'm going to talk about where we are today as of 2023. Another interesting thing is that used or pre-owned EVs are also eligible for a federal tax credit starting in 2023. It's not as high as 7,500, but it's also significant, and that's really important because that's going to provide a lot of options for those of us that mostly purchase pre-owned EVs, pre-owned vehicles. All right, so let's dive in for those changes that are taking place right now and where we are on this federal EV tax credit. So starting January 1st, the tax credit can be up to 7,500, but it depends on the battery size of your vehicle. Also, starting in March, the federal government is going to release more guidance in terms of the materials in the battery, but that hasn't been released yet. As of today, the tax credit can be up to 7,500 for new EVs, but there are some requirements. The first one is that the battery capacity must be 7 kilowatt hours at the minimum. It must be made by a qualified manufacturer. And what does it mean by qualified manufacturing? Qualified manufacturers have basically signed a deal with, they have entered an agreement with the IRS. And you can read about the agreements on the IRS website, but it's a lot of the manufacturers, there's a long list, so I encourage you guys to do. Also, Plugstar.com has that information, so you can go look at it under incentives. Also, the manufacturer suggested retail price of the EV needs to be under 55,000 for sedans, under 80,000 for SUVs, vans, and pickups. So there is a limit on the price of your EV to qualify for this tax credit. And finally, there's a household income limitation, 150,000 for single filers, 225,000 for head of household, and 300,000 for joint filers. So those are the main requirements that folks need to keep in mind. So if you're buying a vehicle or you're planning on buying a vehicle and you're thinking, oh, I want to make sure I qualify for the EV tax credit, you need to make sure you look at these requirements. So we talked about the new tax credit for pre-owned or used EVs starting 2023, which is excellent. There didn't used to be a tax credit for used EVs, and now it's actually up to $4,000 or up to 30% of the vehicle price, whichever is lower. And of course, there are requirements, and the price of the vehicle has to be less than that has to be $25,000 or less. The model has to be at least 2 years old. You have to purchase it by a dealership. It also has to weigh less than 4,000 pounds, and it has to be built primarily for public streets, roads, and highways, and has to have at least 4 wheels. So bikes, for instance, don't qualify, right? So if there's also some income restrictions as noted on the screen, 75,000 for single, 112,500 for head of household, and 115,000 for joint filers. And as usually when you want to apply for these, let's say you buy your vehicle in 2023, you will be filing your taxes in 2024 for 2023. That's when you're going to be filing for this tax credit. So it's not something that you get at the dealership immediately. It's something that you get when you're processing your taxes for that year. Additionally, there's also regional and local incentives, and this really varies depending on the state. In the West Coast, in the East Coast, There's been incentives for many years now, and in some other states, these incentives are started to develop more and more. But also utility companies are interested in folks fueling through electricity. So they will offer incentives. In some cases, because electric vehicles have less emissions, air quality entities also will provide incentives. There are incentives for purchasing of EVs. There's incentives to purchase an EV charger. There's also incentives to lease. So that's interesting. Many of them have household income limitations and also geographic limitations. So depending on your zip code, especially for air quality entities, usually air quality entities want to focus on a special place that historically is an area that has been very polluted. They will there will be a zip code restriction. And then sometimes there's other driving perks like electricity discounts or accessing the HOV lane, which can be very appealing, especially if you live in some places where there's a lot of traffic, like in California. And Plogstar.com has all of this information. All you have to do is enter your zip code and you'll learn what incentives are available for you. We usually compile this information. We have a web developer that help us compile this information with different web resource boards across the country. So we'll have all, if not most, incentives on that website. All right, so I've been talking a little bit about Plogstar.com. So, and our program Plogstar that is basically designed to improve the shopping experience and provide, a centralized hub where people can really learn about EVs and the cost, compare them, and see the incentives, learn about charging, and all of these are available to consumers on Plogstar.com. So if you visit Plogstar.com, you can browse and compare EVs, their costs, and their environmental impacts. You can find updated incentives. You can look for an event near you. It's usually an event that we put so that if you want to test drive an EV, it's not in a sales environment. You can so there's no pressure to buy it. You can just drive it. You can look at it. You can, see how it feels. And there obviously is no commitment to buy, right? So this is something that Plug in America has been doing for many years now all over the country, and you can find one near you. You can also connect with dealerships if you're ready to buy. You can find public charging maps. You can plan a trip if you already have your EV, or if you're renting an EV, you want to charge. You want to select a destination and see where you're going to charge so you're prepared. If you already bought one or you're in the process of buying one, you can shop for the EV charger there, but there's basically a catalog of chargers based on your preferences, and it will connect you to the manufacturer's website. And you can also find a qualified electrician that can install a level 2 charger at home. And there's other more features, but those are the main ones. Plug in America also offers an EV support program, which is basically a helpline for folks that have questions about all this information that we have talked about. And you can email us at support@pluginamerica.org, or you can call us, and we're available to answer your questions from Monday through Friday from 9 to 5 p.m. Pacific time. I think that there's a little bit of time, so I wanted to quickly share or maybe I'll do it afterwards. I just wanted to do a quick demo of Plogstar, but I'll do it at the end. So I also wanted to call out that we have an event throughout the month of April. Plug-in America partners with organizations all over the country to host events where folks can just attend and test drive EVs. So I invite all of you to go to driveelectricearthday.org and find an event near you. You can, most of them are in person. There are some online events that still, we did a lot of online events during COVID, and some folks enjoyed it, so they are still being hosted, but most of them are really in person. And we invite you to go to driveelectricearthday.org to learn more about the events that are near you. As you can see on the map, they're everywhere, including in Canada and Mexico and in Puerto Rico. So let me, I wanted to show Blockstar real quick. So I'm going to share my screen. And I hope that you can see it. Bill, can you give me a thumbs up if you see Blockstar.com? Okay, good, thank you. So this is Blockstar.com, and it's really helpful because you can, it's basically a shop, it has a shopping assistant. You can go here and you can browse vehicles depending on their make or model. You can even compare them with another, you can compare it with another EV, or you can even compare it with a gasoline car, so that you can look at, I don't know, let's just randomly select. And you can look at cost comparison, charging, how do they compare, emissions. So it has a lot of features. Also, if you're interested in learning about incentives, you can just go to the incentives tab. I'm just going to put my zip code here and look at the incentives, and it shows you all of the incentives that you qualify for. So here's the tax credit. This one is important because we talked about this, and the federal tax credit, you can click here and learn more about what's happening here, who qualifies, the qualified manufacturers and their vehicles. Then you can go to this, just learn about all of the different incentives. Then you can go to charging and you can find home charging equipment. You can also find a charging station near you. You can enter your zip code here, and you know, these are DC chargers and these are public stations. You can also find events near you, for instance. So there's just a lot. You can find dealerships that sell EV. So there's this, all of this information is based on your zip code, especially because it's so different depending where you are. So I invite you to visit Blockstar.com when you get a chance. And let me just go back to my screen. And that's it. That's all I have for you guys. So thank you so much. I hope that that wasn't too much information. But yeah, thank you very much. And Bill, I don't know if there are any questions that we should be addressing.
Rosa, there
Right.
are so many questions we could be on for the next couple hours, but we only have till the top of the hour. So we're going to try to highlight a few key ones for you, and feel free to, there's plenty of questions, so feel free to skip if there's one that, you need more information. We can get back to people later, and we will get started with that. Just dropping one other thing in the chat I think people might be interested in. Okay, so looking at some of the questions, what about cost comparisons? You talked a little bit about that, but people were asking questions about the kind of the overall comparison with the, not having to fill gas, but then having to charge, the maintenance reduction costs of electric vehicles. Is there any way to talk about that, or for people to kind of look and compare?
Yeah, and I actually encourage you guys to go to Plugstart.com. That is a really good place to do that comparison. And I hope that you can see my screen where I'm on Plugstart right now. But if you go to compare, you can compare vehicles using this tool, and you can, and it will provide you information based on what we talked about. So for instance, this shares information about cost of ownership. And you can add a vehicle. This is really a really good place to start. Let's say, let's add another car. This is more speed related, but this is a good place to compare prices. And really, but the price of charging really depends on where you're charging, because, and how big the battery is. Because if you have a smaller vehicle, right, versus one that has a bigger battery, and you are charging using the same type of charger, right, you're going to be, it is the vehicle that controls, ultimately the vehicle controls the speed of that charging. So you may have a charger, but the vehicle is the one that limits that speed. So because of the battery of the vehicle, so and also the size of the battery. So if you fill your battery, let's say a Ford Lightning, which is a pickup truck, and like a Chevy Volt, which is a much smaller car, obviously the Lightning is going to require a lot more electricity to fill. And if you're charging at home, you should be charging at dollars per kilowatt hour. So charging at home is always going to be cheaper. Well, first you're comparing between those two vehicles, right? So charging a smaller vehicle is always going to be less. If you're charging your vehicle at night, it's always going to be cheaper. If you charge in the summer and in the winter, your utility may even charge you different rates between summer night and winter night. So there is a lot of factors involved. Electricity is not the same as fuel. And then if you're charging, you're basically paying a premium if you're charging publicly. The cheapest rate of of electricity is always at home. So I think that that's the best way that I can answer that question.
Great, thank you. And we can see your screen, so we did see that. You talked a little bit about the Inflation Reduction Act and the incentives. So there are some questions about how exactly that qualifies because of some of the ways that the incentives are written around manufactured in the US and the battery requirements. How do people find out what EVs are available for the incentives and which ones might not?
Yes, so these rules actually just changed, and what I presented to you guys is the most recent information, but you can go to the IRS, and actually I'm going to put a link. Where's the best place to put a link? In the chat?
Okay. Yep, that's a good spot.
That is the link that is directly in regards to the clean vehicles. And you'll see that there's a link for used clean vehicles, qualified vehicles, there's used vehicles, new vehicles, and some qualified commercial vehicles. And then you'll see, so I've basically summarized it in the slide, but you'll see that there's a link to the index of qualified manufacturers. And I can share my screen too. So let me see. screen. Okay. So the link that I just sent you just brings you to this. And the vehicles that qualify, that's the list that I just shared in my slide. And this is the index of qualified manufacturers and vehicles. When you click here, you see that these are the ones. Also, you want to make sure that there is that price. It cannot exceed the suggested price. And these are the index of manufacturers that currently qualify. When this rule became available earlier last year, there was a mention of the materials in the battery, but that has changed as of like December 28th of last year. And the rules on materials are actually going to be released in March. So the only limitations that you have right now are the ones showing here on the IRS page. So I really recommend folks to go to this page and review. But I've tried to summarize it in my screen. So this is what you are looking at basically right now.
Great, thank you. So I think, a summary for us in working on the Inflation Reduction Act is that the good news is that there's incredible incentives for many different things, electric vehicles being just one of them. The bad news is that it's complicated and it's going to take some time for this to work through. And so there is going to be a bit of a learning curve. And I'm sure that Plug in America, as well as Interfaith Power and Light, will be trying to help people to work their way through that so that we can all take advantage of these incentives and move towards carbon-free energy. So a next question, we have some people who are asking about, what about apartment dwellers or people in multifamily housing with charging? What are the solutions for folks that might not so easily be able to pull up to a garage and plug right into their charger that way?
Right now, that is the biggest challenge, and I personally go through that right now because I don't have a space to charge at home because I live in a multi-unit dwelling. So right now, the Plug in America, for instance, is working on a policy. We're working on incorporating EV charging for new dwellings. That is something that we're really trying to push. Our policy team is working hard on that, and it's difficult, as you can imagine, because the real estate sector is very powerful. So we're trying really hard to, so around 100 years ago, or a little bit more, dwellings didn't have to guarantee hot water. Your apartment just didn't come with hot water. And a lot of people had to push into policy and advocate that hot water was a right. And it's a similar process. I mean, obviously it's not the same EV charging than hot water, but the process in which they're going, the advocacy of that process, which is going through the codes, going through the dwelling codes, is the process that Plug in America is taking to incorporate accessibility. Because even though right now a lot of people that live in multi-complex dwellings are maybe their priorities not EVs, for EVs to then become accessible in the future for everybody, we have to make them available, right? So otherwise people are just not going to get them. And some complexes, it really depends right now on the board of the complex itself for them to determine if they want to do it. But we're pushing, in partnership with other entities, incorporating EVs into building codes for new buildings. So that's one of the biggest challenges but we're really trying to move the needle on a positive direction there.
There are a number of questions about battery recycling and concerns about the lithium, the cobalt, and the state of
Absolutely.
recycling these things. What can you tell us about that?
Absolutely. I completely understand the concern, and I have that concern on my own. There's been a lot of conversation in the IRA of like, making that a requirement for the second half of that's why right now it's not, it's they went back on it. That's why they haven't released. They're going to release the recycling materials criterion in March, because right now none of the manufacturers qualified for it, right? And why? Because right now there's no available at scale recyclability available for batteries, and it is a challenge because lithium is a limited resource in the world. So we're going back to basics. Before it was about emissions, it was about the environmental impact during the drive of the vehicle. Now it's about thinking about the environmental impact during the manufacture of the vehicle. So this environmental impact is being pushed to the early stages of the life cycle of the vehicle. So organizations, advocacy organizations like Plug in America are thinking, what does this look like in terms of not going to developing nations like Congo or in Africa, that is already happening in the cell phone industry, right, that they're using. So right now there's a lot of thinking behind how to do that, and there has been a lot of funding from the government allocated to manufacturing companies to develop recyclability of batteries at scale, but it's in very early stages. And I would say that is the one of the main challenges when it comes to environmental justice for electric vehicles is finding environmentally just sources of lithium that respect the people and the environment where these reside, because right now that doesn't exist. So the conversation is oftentimes driven by manufacturers that want to just produce, but a lot of organizations that are more on the mindset of like, it's not just about the technology. We're really trying to push forward recyclability that is not just good for the environment, but good for people and good for practices. But that's still definitely in development.
Great. Thank you so much, Rosa. There are many more questions, but we are running out of time. I did want to take just a minute to talk to people about the work that we're doing. And one of the reasons that Interfaith Power and Light has done this webinar on EV 101s is because we have a campaign that we're doing on auto accountability, trying to hold the automakers accountable for moving away from carbon polluting vehicles towards electric vehicles. And in particular, we're targeting General Motors and Toyota on that campaign right now. And in the chat, you will see dropped in a couple of blog posts that give a little bit of a description of that. For this, it's very important for us. A decade and a half ago, the dealing with transportation in this country and the world seemed impossible. We were dealing with electricity production and really producing lower carbon electricity, and we've done a lot of that. We have a long way to go, but we've made incredible progress. But now we actually have a solution to deal with carbon pollution from transportation, and we need to move rapidly in that direction. And so that's what this campaign is about. Please take a look at those blog posts. At the end of each of those posts, there is an action that you can take to connect with us and sign on to the letter that we'll be hand delivering to both General Motors and to Toyota in the coming months. I hope that you will join us in that important work to make sure that we move quickly and thoughtfully towards electric vehicles. So Again, Rosa, thank you so much for joining us today. People love the talk. I think there's just so much to learn, and it's a big learning curve for people. So having someone like you to explain it to us is incredibly helpful. We really appreciate your help and your thoughtful presentation today.
So happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me. And yeah, I hope to see you guys again soon.
All right. Thanks everyone for joining. We look forward to some more webinars in the coming months. Keep an eye out on your email. We'll let you know ahead of time, and we will talk with you then. Take care, everyone.